I was 13, so I think it was really hard for me to look at what was happening from someone else's perspective at the time. As I've gotten older, I've started, having those conversations with her, but I think it was really hard. She's a single mom, and she's being told that her child has 6 months to live. I think it goes back to vision and having to create things we want for ourselves. I always say that a lot of my biggest and my projects I'm most proud of come out of times that most people would think are bad or negative, which is kind of how I've always lived my life with the whole brain tumor thing. My career started out as something that most people would consider the worst thing that can happen to somebody. But for me, I took it as a time to change paths and do something that I wouldn't have thought of before. Yeah, for me, I think vision has kind of always been everything. I love that word. I haven't really thought of it in that way before, but when I was too sick to get out of bed, because there was definitely a 6 to 8 month period where I didn't go to school. I did not do anything. And I tried my best, but it just was not possible for me at the time. Um, Sitting in bed, my mom and I had to rethink what my vision for my life was. I think actually I was very lucky that it happened, I think, so young, because I still had this very like delusional mentality that I could do whatever I wanted in the world. Like I was moving to LA and I was going to be like the next movie star. Like that just how it was in my brain. The decisions that you make, they're up to you. We don't have control of the things that happen to us, but just making the best decisions you can in the most positive way you can. That's the key to getting where you want to go and surviving.
And we're recording. So Grace, appreciate you coming on the Great Matters podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I know we've been chatting about this for a minute, and I've been thinking about it even longer. And yeah, I'm just really excited to be able to share your story, all the things you're up to, and just how inspiring you are to people of all kinds. And I'm just really thankful to have you on today to chat.
Thank you.
So you said you're in Texas. What do you have going on right now? Because I know you're all over the place. Every time I look at your Instagram, you're in this country, you're in this part of the United States, but today you're in Texas. So let's just start there. What do you get going on today?
I am in Texas right now visiting my mom. She is here for work right now, and I kind of use Texas as my place to go away from Los Angeles and write and work and stay sane. So I'm visiting her for a couple weeks, hopefully get some inspiration and some writing done. So yeah, taking some downtime, which I think is really the key to staying productive.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And make sure you tell your mom I said hi. I
I
haven't
will.
spoken to her in a minute, so yeah, that's awesome. And actually, my mom just left today. She was here for past couple days visiting for her birthday, so it was nice to be able to have her around, and especially after last year and not being able to see as many people as we'd like to or as often. So yeah, that's awesome. And with that being said, I want to start us off with your take on 2020, and I get a lot of different perspectives, and you have a unique way of looking at the world, and I'm just curious, like, what was 2020 like for you?
Um, 2020 was interesting, as I think it was for everybody. Um, to be honest, I actually was having a worse time, I think, before quarantine started. I had been working a lot at the beginning of 2020, and I had an entire schedule planned for the rest of the year, and I was probably definitely overworking myself, which I tend to do sometimes. Um, and so, sorry. Um, and so I think March kind of came as a shock to me. I remember about a 3 day like stint where every hour the phone would ring and it would be some company canceling something for the year. And so for me, as someone who loves to work and puts everything into my work, it was really difficult to see all of these projects kind of postponed or canceled. So I had my time where I was upset. I had a couple months where we didn't do anything. I think everyone was kind of in the same boat. Didn't really leave the house. I have to be very careful because my immune system is compromised, and a lot of my friends as well are fighting illnesses. So didn't see anybody. But then I remember I had to go to Texas for a doctor's appointment, and it was kind of my first time that I had left the house in a while. And during that time, I got inspired and I started working on a new project, and I started writing again and working again just on my own terms, which really helped me remember why I do the things I do. I think we get wrapped up in what we think we have to do. And I like to applaud myself and be like, oh, well, my brain tumor reset my mentality. I realized that I had to do what I loved and I had to do what was truly important, not what I thought I had to do. But then COVID was kind of a nice second reminder, another reset that work isn't everything. And if it is everything to you, if you really love what you do, you can find ways to do it just for the love of it. It doesn't have to be a specific outcome. So it's been tough, but I'm starting to remember why I do what I do. And it's really, really, it's been a wonderful time of reevaluation.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that you shared that perspective. And I watched your year-end review of 2020 just a while ago, and I saw that, and I saw all the things that you're up to. And there's just so many things about you that from the day I've met you to now, and just seeing you progress and all the things that you're doing with your own creativity, and you're wanting to create community for other people and support. And something you shared about 2020 for you was similar to me, and that's, like we tend to get wrapped up in work, whether it's an inspiring vision we're working towards, or if it's like running away from something, like we're working away from something. It doesn't matter, because it gets to a point where we have to take some time back, look within, see why we're doing what we're doing in the first place, be reminded of that. And you spoke to so many things that I just feel like it's really important to go there right now and just kind of give an overview of just, your journey from, when you were about 15 years old to today, even before that, like what your start was in terms of like what you were passionate about, what lit you up, and like what you were adventuring, because you did a lot of interesting things as a young child, and that evolved over time, and there was some obstacles, and it makes so much sense as to why you looked at 2020 in such a productive manner, and then actually fulfilled that productivity with so many things that we'll talk about later on. But I guess just for the listeners that aren't familiar with your story, let's just give an overview of just kind of like where you started and like the obstacles along the way that led you to where you are today, doing all the amazing things that you're doing.
Yeah, so I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, on the lake. I loved activities, being outdoors. I was in a lot of different sports. I was very involved at school. I was just always very creative, and I always wanted to be doing something. I remember my mom got me a laptop for Christmas when I was like 9, because I wanted the video camera. And so I would just sit and make like iMovies all the time. And that was really how I started making films. And then when I was around, I guess backtracking the other direction, when I was around 6 or 7, I think, I went and saw a production of a circus performance in my hometown. And I looked at my mom and I was like, this is what I'm gonna do. She was like, oh gosh. She does life insurance, and circus performers are not insurable. So she was like, oh my gosh, my child's going crazy. But she signed me up for the summer camp for the kids, and I started performing with the circus, and I performed with them for like 9 years, I think. So growing up, I was always very creative and had a weird childhood. But that was really where I was introduced to theater and costumes and scripts and just everything, that I ended up loving and pursuing as a career. But then when I was about 13, I started getting really sick and tired. And I didn't want to go to circus. I was also a figure skater. I didn't want to go to skating. I couldn't get through a school day. I was just exhausted. I was not the kid that I had always been growing up. So my mom, who knows me very well, was like, this is not my child. There's something happening. And I went to the emergency room and got tested for mono. I didn't have mono, but my red and white blood cell counts were extremely off, which landed me in the Children's Hospital of Minneapolis in the leukemia department. I did not have leukemia, but they would spend 6 months trying to figure out why my red and white blood cell counts had these weird markers. That led up to January 9th of 2015, when I was 13 years old and I was diagnosed with a brainstem glioma, which is a tumor in the pons of the brain. It's inoperable, and chemotherapy and radiation had a very slim chance of working. So these type of tumors usually have an 8% chance of survival for 6 months. That was kind of the day my life changed, obviously. But I had a really weird brain tumor journey, because a lot of people, the day they're diagnosed is their first day in the hospital, or it's the day they're prepped for surgery. or the day they get their chemo regimen. For me, January 9th was the day I checked out. I have this very backwards adventure being a brain tumor patient. I checked out of the hospital that day because there was nothing they could do. And I was sent out on this 6-month journey of not knowing where I would end up or if I would still be alive. So my mom and I sat down and she was like, what do you want to do? It's just me and my mom. So we were very fortunate to have a flexible life, maybe too flexible. I probably wouldn't recommend this for everyone. It was a little insane, but we rented an apartment over the phone. Also, don't recommend that. And I moved to Los Angeles and started pursuing anything that inspired me or intrigued me. And it led me on some pretty crazy adventures. And that's kind of my diagnosis story. 6 years later, I still have my tumor, but it's completely stable. I still have bad days. I struggle with a lot of seizures and symptoms and headaches. And when the inflammation gets really high, you're in bed. But it's been a very fascinating 6 years, and it's truly changed my perspective of the world. And I think it made me who I am today. So yeah,
I love that.
very, very grateful.
Yeah, I love that, and we resonate on a lot of levels. As you know, we've known each other for a few years now, and one, I've performed in the circus for about a month back in February of 2015. It was I subbed in for an injured BMX athlete. And that was an amazing experience. Not as much time as you, but it was enough for me to grasp and enjoy my time. So that's fun. But yeah, you and I still live with brain tumors. But at the end of the day, it sounds like you're not defined by your circumstances. And that's, your TEDx talk when you were still 15, I think, when you gave that, right?
Yeah.
That outlined, that you weren't going to let this stop you. And you and your mom formed a pact together to go after your dreams. And so what I'm curious of, it sounds like vision has always been important to you, whether it was when you were younger, going to the circus and learning from that, and then seeing production, and then you're writing your own books and your own films, and you're doing a lot of things behind the scenes as well as in front of the camera as well. I should say behind the camera and in front of the camera. And I'm curious, like, how important is vision to you, whether it was chasing your dreams originally, overcoming the brain tumor, and then, leading to what you're doing today?
Yeah, for me, I think vision has kind of always been everything. I love that word. I haven't really thought of it in that way before, but when I was too sick to get out of bed, because there was definitely a 6 to 8 month period where I didn't go to school. I did not do anything, and I tried my best, but it just was not possible for me at the time. Sitting in bed, my mom and I had to rethink what my vision for my life was. All my friends were applying to the circus school in Montreal, and we're going to go to college there. And suddenly I didn't know if I was going to be able to finish 7th grade, which is a very basic task to do. You don't think, oh, I'm not going to finish 7th grade. So for me, I think you have to build the life that you want. And it really is, then you can do anything that you can even dream of. And so while I was laying in bed, it was a lot about what I was going to do when I got better. And that for me was the motivation to get out of bed. I moved to LA, and I suddenly was so intrigued and excited about life that it really did get me out of bed every day, which I think allowed me to get through that sick period. But I started doing what my mom calls sit down activities. So I started doing a program through Parsons College in New York, and it was all about fashion and media and entertainment. And that was when I realized I could package these ideas that I had in my head. And so I spent that year studying that. And then I went and worked with Teen Vogue, where I learned more about packaging visions and seeing things come to life. And for me, I love all aspects of creativity. That goes from writing to creating to that final product. And even with the book that you were involved in, for me, it was a lot more about what was going to come out of the book than the book itself. So yeah, I like that you said that, but yes, vision is everything.
Yeah, I love it because that's just kind of how I live my life. The work I do today, whether it's speaking, it's coaching the clients I work with, it's content creation, it's having these conversations, it's my own book. It's always about the vision that we hold in our mind, because it sounds like you and I share that similarity. And the brain tumor diagnosis, doesn't matter what age you are. I would say it'd be kind of more unfathomable at the age you were, because it's kind of, I'd say, more difficult to understand and comprehend what's going on. But either way, the vision is what allowed us to overcome the circumstances, because you and I, in the shoes we were, if we had decided to play small, to take our diagnosis, be defined by it, and not go after our dreams or anything, whatever it was, no one would have judged us. No one would have felt, they would have understood. Maybe not so much to relate to the situation, but they'd be like, oh, that makes sense. Like, it's a traumatic experience, it's okay. But something inside of us, which I would argue is the vision, was more compelling, and it pushed us forward. And it has you doing all the amazing things you're doing today, which we'll get into. You're an author. You've written another book, I think, from the understanding of your year-end video I watched, which was last year you wrote that book. You're writing films. You're doing all these amazing things that if it hadn't been for that vision being clear, maybe you wouldn't be doing today. And something you said inside of all that is another thing I say. And it's just so funny because we haven't talked about these things before, and now we are, and it makes sense. But you chose to rather than focus on what if fill in the blank, anything negative that could come from this diagnosis, you focus on what will. What will be true? What will I do? Where will I go? And so can you talk about that? And has that been something that you've ever been conscious of on focusing, or, how may that change your perspective moving forward? Like the what if rather than, or the what will rather than the what if, concept of thought.
Yeah. I think actually I was very lucky that it happened, I think, so young, because I still had this very like delusional mentality that I could do whatever I wanted in the world. Like I was moving to LA and I was going to be like the next movie star. Like that just how it was in my brain. And I think that mentality is what got me so far in the beginning. Then of course later on it's hard work and it's connecting and doing the stuff that people don't want to do. But yeah, I think for me, I really love that you said, it's what I will do. I have always been someone that's like, if I want to do something, I will figure out a way to make it happen. The book is a good example of that. There was a lot of times where I walked up to people, I sent emails, I bugged people with many, many phone calls. I have a friend named Jace Ward, and I would love for you guys to connect eventually, but his motto is, I'm too busy to die. He has too many things he wants to do. He's being treated right now for a DIPG at Stanford. But yeah, this mentality of I'm too busy to die. I didn't have a patient or victim mentality because I was too busy. I was too busy with things I created for myself. A lot of people often, we sit around and we wait. We're like, oh, well, one day I'll be promoted into my dream job, or one day the perfect business partner or life partner will come to me. But that's not always reality. We have to create opportunities for ourselves. And those small opportunities will lead to bigger ones once we prove proof of concept, as they say in the movie world. But yeah, I think I wanted things done, so I started making them for myself, because people aren't always going to do things for you. And you can always find your own way to get what you want done. So yeah, it's definitely a skill that I think I learned at a young age, but if you think you can do it, you can find a way. Trust me, you can do anything. It sounds so cliche, but it's definitely true.
Most of the cliche things are true, and that's why they become cliche, because people just take them and then they don't apply them. And that's what I believe you highlighted was you've taken these learnings, you've applied them, but what it comes back to, everything comes back to vision. And then, in those moments, the too busy to die, like that's why it's so important. I believe it's so important that people have things they're passionate about, whether it's a side hobby, a side hustle, just an interest or anything. It's just something that you can progress in, because the chasing of perfection, which is a delusion, like perfection is non-existent. Like we're human beings. That chase, though, to perfect our craft, to progress, I think that was something that you and I and many other people that overcome adversity in any form is the fuel. It's the vision. It's not motivation. Motivation is just elevated energy in a moment, but it's what inspires us. And when you have something that you can progress in, that you are chasing, you're too busy to die. You're too busy to let things get to you, if you have that perspective. And I think that that's something that you just highlighted. And I love that you mentioned that. And before we dive into the book, because you mentioned the word lucky, you mentioned the book a couple times, and I definitely want to get in that, because that's how we found each other. I'm curious, when you were going through the diagnosis, like when you were diagnosed and you were facing this journey ahead, this condition, or this journey that was being predicted to you in many different variables, in that time and then since then, who has been sources of inspiration for you to model in the world? Someone that has overcome something, someone that is doing something that you want to do, or maybe doing now because you've already accomplished so much since then. Who comes to mind in terms of people that you took inspiration or energy from that allowed you to be supplemented with the fuel that you had from your vision?
Oh my, there's so many people. I think for me, it's a mixture between people I looked up to in my industry and people in my daily life. And I think everyone should have both. Um, my mom, 100%. I was very lucky that she reshaped my perspective very quickly. I had a lot of people around me who treated me like a sick kid. And I think that's just how everyone kind of reacts. The whole cliche about like cancer, the scary word, and no one knows what to say. It's very true. And I think even as a patient, I still don't know how to react to other people's stories sometimes. So my mom reshaping my vision very clearly at a young age was very important. I had an aunt named Tira who was fighting cancer at the same time as my diagnosis. And she had always been someone that I looked up to from a young age. She opened her own yoga studio, and she was a perfect example of someone who lived life to the fullest and just did what she wanted to do, which I think is like the key to life. If you can find a way to take what you love and what you want to do and make it a career, that's like the key. Like that is bingo. And she had the opportunity to do all of that. She opened her yoga studio and she lived this life that was incredible. Unfortunately, she passed away from her cancer, but she was just such an amazing role model for me. And she was always encouraging. She was like, yeah, of course, Grace is going to move to LA and do this, and she's going to be great at it. And I think having that kind of positivity and that voice and that mentor was key to me not giving up on myself during the really hard times. As far as in my industry, people like Lady Gaga really inspire me. If you've seen her documentary, she struggles a lot with, illnesses and getting through the day and getting to do what she loves and balancing health and wellness. I love Olivia Wilde. I think she has just such a strong female perspective in film. So there's definitely a lot of people. My entire management team is incredible women. So yeah, there's a lot, but I think having that mix of people who know you personally and people who are doing what you want to do is definitely the key to having a strong support system.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's just fascinating that, I was 21 when my first diagnosis occurred. You were 15, and it's, 6-year gap there, but still so young. I mean, I'm 32 now, and I'm still, I feel like a kid. Like there's just so much life to experience. But there was something somehow, and it's probably the way our parents raised us. It's the people we looked up to and tried to model. But there was just something that allowed us to focus on the what I will do or what will happen that we want to create, that vision, and looking towards people that we can mentor or that can mentor us, whether virtually or in our daily lives. And it's similar, you and I had people that were what I call virtual mentors, people we looked up to, maybe we have met now, maybe we haven't yet, but then people in our immediate life that have overcome challenge of any kind that give us that perspective of I can and I will. And I think that's two of the most important things coming after vision, I believe, is having something, like I talked about earlier, having something that you can progress in, that you can just lose time. You get in that flow state. Nothing else matters because you're in this spot and you want to get better. But then also looking to people that are successful in however you define that, whether it's mentally, emotionally, it's, in your case, acting or fashion or whatever it may be that inspires you, looking up to other people that are doing something similar or have done something similar, taking all that information as fuel. And it's just so fascinating to me at the young ages that we were, that was just in our DNA. That was in our code to do that, to look at that. And then what are we going to do to move forward? How can we move forward? And I've talked to you about this. I treated my diagnosis like an injury. As a BMX athlete, it was just the first thing, like, all right, doc, what do we do? I don't care about what could happen. I care about getting back on my bike. And for you is pursuing your own dream. So I love that you said that. And then that, with moving forward, you've always come across someone that, to me, that someone that wants to contribute to others, that wants to be a true leader, that wants to share success with other people, which I love because I don't believe in success being one-dimensional. I think when I feel successful is when other people around me are lifted up and they're chasing their own dreams. So there comes the book. There's two things I want to dive into the book about. Three things. One, kind of how you went through that process of forming the idea for the book. how we met, the concept behind the title. And we'll just go there. We'll just go with those two because I don't want to get too ahead. But yeah, let's just start there. Like, how did you come up with this idea? And then what did you do to make that come to fruition?
I think it goes back to vision and having to create things we want for ourselves. I always say that a lot of my biggest and my projects I'm most proud of come out of times that most people would think are bad or negative, which is kind of how I've always lived my life with the whole brain tumor thing. My career started out as something that most people would consider the worst thing that can happen to somebody. But for me, I took it as a time to change paths and do something that I wouldn't have thought of before. So I had something in my career happen that was a little bit of a letdown. There was a company I'd been wanting to work with for a very long time, and the meeting happened and it just did not go as planned. They were like, we can't do this right now. It's not going to work. So I was in my feels about it, very upset, 15-year-old, end of the world, so dramatic. But I sat down and I was like, okay, well, if someone's not going to do it for me, I'm going to do it myself and I'm going to get to do it my way, which is probably even a better thing than having something that's fully controlled by like for business purposes. So I sat down and I thought, well, what do I know? I knew my story and I knew I'd been told by a lot of people to write a book about myself and about my story. But I think my experiences feel A, very incomplete, and B, not, I don't want to say the word realistic because it is very realistic, but it's not a broad experience of what this is overall, I think, to be a brain tumor survivor. So I felt that there was missing perspectives, which led to me wanting to include the stories of other brain tumor survivors in this book as well. Maybe one day I'll write an autobiography about everything that I've been through, but this was my time to sit back and let others tell their perspective. The entire idea that I just said to you came together about it, like in one night, sitting in my living room, like bawling, like typing on my laptop like a crazy person. And I think I had like my entire first chapter done that night. So like you were saying, it's all about that vision and getting through those tough times and getting where we want to be. Sometimes just doing it ourselves if we have to. And then that idea, the actual "you're so lucky" and this whole concept, it came from a doctor's appointment I had had just a couple of weeks before that night that I started writing everything. I had met with my oncologist back in Minnesota, and I had just done my MRI, my checkup scan, and I had been put into a group of brain tumor survivors, like a Facebook group, like a support group. And I was told that day that out of the group of like 30 kids, I was the only one left. And that made me realize, and she said something, she was like, oh, what, look at that look. And I just was like, this is such a weird thing to be celebrating, because it felt hard inside to know that it was a fact at this point in my journey. And B, it was just strange. I don't know. So I went home and I was playing with that concept a lot. I was the only one left in this group. And so what did that mean for me as a survivor and my voice and the fact that I was still here? And I felt, very back and forth between this fate, or was it something that I did? Or because everyone's always like, oh, well, what did you do? Like, what exactly did you do? And I'm like, I don't know. I ate healthy. I did these things, but a lot of kids did that. And we didn't all have the same outcome. And so playing with this idea of fate or something else, I went with this concept of "you're so lucky." It's usually the first thing that people say to me. They're like, oh my God, that's awful, but you're so lucky. And so I wanted people to play with this question and see where we ended up on all of these people's different perspectives. And then I scrolled through Instagram hashtags like am I a Gen Z? Yeah, like my Gen Z self. I'm like called myself a millennial in my head, which isn't right. My Gen Z upbringing went on the internet and started finding people around the world that I thought had interesting perspectives of what it meant to be a brain tumor survivor, people with different types of brain tumors. And I learned so much. Like I didn't know what like NF1 and 2 was, and that you could have like multiple brain tumors, and that some people had spine brain tumors, and it was just a whole thing. A whole new world that I didn't even know existed. And so started reaching out to people, and Josh was one of the people that I found through the internet. And I read his story as well as the story of 11 other people that I thought could provide something really interesting. And I DM'd all these people. They probably thought I was crazy because we didn't even follow each other. Like, I did not know these people. These were not friends over the internet that I knew. These were random people from countries all over. Australia, France, just like everywhere. And I shot everybody an email through direct message on Instagram, and some people replied, some people did not reply. That's okay. But Josh is one of the people that replied, and that set us out on this crazy journey. And 3 years later, everyone in the book's doing really well. So yeah, we're a pretty cool bunch of people.
Yeah, I'd say so. I agree. And it's cool that you took initiative again to create something in your mind that, you wanted help with, and you were essentially denied that help, but you had the resources inside of you, which is, another thing we'll talk about later, because all the things you're doing today for yourself, which is amazing. But yeah, you went to Instagram and you wrote a book from other people's perspectives, contributing to it, and it allowed us to connect, allowed us to become friends over the years. We get to hang out in person at a Barnes and Noble book signing and little what would you call it, like little speaking opportunity as well. And it was just, that was a cool experience to see everyone come together, and then to have that book and to share different perspectives. And when it comes to the you're so lucky concept, I wrote an interesting perspective on, because that's the first thing, like you said, people are like, oh, that's gonna be the worst thing that ever happened to you, and oh man, you're so lucky to be alive. And I still believe, and I've reread actually the other day when you contributed a chapter to my book, which is something I got from you. And I also got inspired from like hip hop artists that always collab on music together. And I was like, oh man, it'd be cool to get a couple different people like what Grace did, but like their perspective of these concepts with my own story of what I'm writing about. So when you shared yours, one, I loved it. And then two, I reread my entry in your book, and my perspective is still the same. I don't believe in luck in that regard, because I think that you and I we went through that experience because one, we were able to handle it. We were able to overcome it. And two, because it gave us a higher purpose in life, which is what I believe the book's all about. It's about serving other people. It's about bringing people together to create community. But at the end of the day, it's to be a support system. And I'm just curious as to see if like that's actually my perspective of what you did, and what my perspective is in life is similar to your intentions with the book. Would you say that that's, I think you've kind of mentioned it to me, maybe that's where I got the idea, but like, was that the whole intention behind the book, was to get other people's perspectives? But, for what purpose would you say that was?
I think, yeah, you got it there. It was to get other people's perspectives, but to share this one understanding that I think all of us have kind of come to. I think everyone in the book has a really interesting perspective of the world. And we see the things around us, I think, a lot more clearly than people who haven't been through something like this. And it can be any life event that causes you to go through that. It can be a family death. It can be a brain tumor. It can be a divorce. Anything that forces you out of your comfortable little life bubble, your perspective changes, and you start realizing that everyone around you is going through something, whether they choose to share it or not. And I think walking through the world with that broadened perspective is what allows me to do what I do. Sometimes it is very hard to see those things. It makes life really difficult sometimes, but I would not go back to the narrow perspective I held once, just because it makes life a lot more interesting, and it attracts a lot of people that make my life more valuable and make my life a lot more amazing than it already is. So yeah, I think the book it's about community. Like you were saying with the Barnes and Noble event, which is another thing. Sometimes you have to do things for yourself. I marched up to a random guy, this poor guy at Barnes and Noble. And I was like, I need the stage. I need a book tour. And this guy's like, who is this 15-year-old? What is she doing in Barnes and Noble? Like, it was such an awkward situation. But I was like, I have something to say, and we need a place to say it. Everyone has such unique and interesting perspectives. But what I also think is really interesting is we all kind of have the same, my mom always uses the word emotions. when she reads the book, she says, you guys all have unique perspectives, but you all have the same emotions kind of running through it. And I think that was something that was really interesting for me to realize, because it's true. We've all been through very different things. Yes, they're similar in a lot of ways, but we all kind of ended on the same conclusion. And I think that's really cool, because it makes you realize what something like this can do to you as a person in a very positive way. There's someone banging on my door. Can we pause for 1 second?
Yeah, for sure.
I'm sorry. Oh my, I'm sorry. Our house flooded with the winter storm thing. We got to Texas yesterday and the whole house was wet. So that was the maintenance people, but I told them to come tomorrow.
Oh no.
I don't know what I was saying.
You were talking about I feel like the ending conclusion of all of our stories that we contributed landed on the same emotion, and how you thought that was really fascinating, because we all share very similar, but in the micro, very different experiences through the larger similarity of brain tumors, but very, very different experiences, different ages, different, journeys through that. But we all landed on like a similar emotion and perspective moving forward. And I'm just curious, what was that for you?
I don't know if I can pinpoint what emotion it was. I think it was, I'm not sure hope is the exact word, but I like that word a lot. I think all of us knew that there was something more that we had to do, and we just had to. I always say that, my work in brain tumor advocacy, it's not something that I do because I think I should. It's something that I do because I have to. And sometimes that's a big pressure that I put on myself, but it really does just feel like a responsibility I have. I've been through this and I've had a different outcome than a lot of people, a lot of my friends. And it just feels like this is my next step as a fighter and a survivor, is to use my voice and tell my story and connect with other people like you. And our book was one way we were able to do that. Oh, I was saying a little story about, I went up to this guy and was like, we need a place to tell our story. We have something very important to say. And that led to us getting that Barnes & Noble tour, and then another spot, and people started listening. And I think it was really interesting because it wasn't just brain tumor survivors who connected. It was people who had been through all different types of life events, because everyone's going through something. And so it may not be as dramatic as a brain tumor, but I think if we can find the positive in life and realize that we're meant to do something more, I think we're very lucky to know what we are passionate about. A lot of people have to search for that for a very long time. But it, again, cliche, but living every single day as if it's your last and not wasting time, because time is very important. And a lot of people don't have very much of it. So doing what we can with what we've got.
For sure. I agree. I think it's people think I'm crazy when I say probably one of the most grateful moments in my life besides being born was being diagnosed, because it just changed me inside and out 180 degrees, and it led me to the work I do today, which, it took me two more, I call them wake up calls, of brain tumor diagnosis and different treatment journeys to get clear on my true purpose, because I thought BMX was my dream and everything, and it saved my life literally and figuratively. It's the reason why I found out I had a brain tumor. But like you, I felt so compelled to take on the responsibility of sharing my experiences, what I learned, and what helped me, so that way I can help others overcome whether it's a brain tumor or any other kind of circumstance that's an obstacle or an adversity. Because, like you said, at the very macro level, we all have the same basic human needs that have been, I argue to use the word, violated with different adversities. And the micro may look different. Not everyone's going to go through a brain tumor like you and I. There's a lot of people out there that are, a lot more people than we ever fathomed before it happened to us. Yeah. But the basic human needs are always challenged emotionally, spiritually, and mentally, and physically to some degree with any challenge you're going through. And so I think, similar to you, from sharing my journey, from sharing my experience, my perspective, I've been able to connect with people from all over the world of all kinds of life, all sorts of interests and challenges, because it's not about the micro. It's about the overall picture of, here's an adversity, here's what allowed me to move forward, and here's how I overcame it. Here's how you can too. And it applies. Yeah. On that note, we were talking about emotion as well with the different people that contributed chapters throughout your book. You're so lucky. I don't think I've ever asked you this. I'm always curious to ask people in similar situations that we were in, but we know what our experience was. We were going through it. We saw it with our own eyes. We felt it. The information was coming into our ears, going through our brain. No pun intended there, actually. But I'm curious, have you ever had the conversation with your mom or ever thought about what that experience was for her going through that with you?
Yeah, I think I was 13, so I think it was really hard for me to look at what was happening from someone else's perspective at the time. As I've gotten older, I've started, having those conversations with her, but I think it was really hard. She's a single mom, and she's being told that her child has 6 months to live. So that's like her whole family right there. And so I think both of us kind of went into this eyes forward mode. I was very lucky that she had this we have to do whatever we can perspective, and not necessarily in like a we have to make you better perspective, which I think would have been a lot of pressure on me. It was we need to allow you to live your best life. And that was kind of just like our motto. Every day was an adventure. And we didn't know what was going to happen, but you can't think about that too much because then you get wrapped up in that. And then you start losing even more of your life to something that you don't have control over. So I think it was definitely extremely hard. I think it's harder for both of us. And now kind of, I consider myself on the other end of like that now, which is also a weird thing because I still have the tumor. Nothing has changed in the last 6 years. But coming out of that mentality of like, I have to fight through this, we've realized how much more difficult it was than we really understood at the time. So I think that's something that everyone kind of goes through when you go through a life-changing event. You just have to make it through. And some people choose to do that by, just like leveling out to zero and like not quitting. That's not the word, but you have two choices. You can either go like 100% full speed ahead, or you can kind of stop where you are. And we took probably the crazier path of the two, 100%, 110% straight ahead. So yeah, we definitely adapted the delusional positive mentality, which I think got us through a lot. But I do contribute a lot of my survival to that mentality. I think a lot of people have different journeys, and I don't think there's any one right journey or that there's any wrong journeys. But some people have to live their lives in hospitals, and I think that puts you in a very different mindset than someone who is new to Los Angeles and 13 and excited about life and every single day. So yeah, it was really hard for both of us. I think it was a lot harder for her than it was for me. But I was very lucky to have her be supportive of my career, and we started living a new life together. So yeah, good and bad.
Yeah, I feel that. Like, I think we have badass moms, and that
Yeah.
was similar for me because she was, I don't know if I've told you this, but for me, when I asked you about who inspired you through your diagnosis and just your recovery and getting you where you are today, essentially, for me, it was, Lance Armstrong, another cyclist, but also my mom and her overcoming colon cancer. She's alive and well today. She fought through that with a smile on her face. Actually kept it for me for a while once I moved away from home to pursue my dream, because that was her biggest dream, was seeing me succeed. So it's just so crazy to think of that. And the reason I was asking is because I find that it was probably harder, and I actually know this, it was harder on people in my external world, like my family and my friends, than it was for me. And that's
Yeah.
something that I've always believed in. It's like, for me, it's so funny to be, I'm 11 years out from my first diagnosis, and like you, still live with the brain tumors. But for me, it was, looking back, it was easier than people watching, because I at least had the belief I could create, that I could overcome it. Other people are just watching kind of from the outside, just like hoping they can't do anything. They feel so inadequate, essentially. And my mom was going through like the guilt of like it's her baby, and like something that is happening, like what could she have done, or did she cause, like all those things. But for me, it was like, all right, this is what it is. Like I had my week of feeling sorry for myself, feeling embarrassed, which is another reason why I share, because I don't want anyone to feel that way from anything, or alone or isolated, weird, broken. Like I felt all that, but then it got to a point where I told you, I was like, just treat it like an injury. Like, when can I get back on my bike? When can I compete again? And it was easier to do that than I think for the people to watch from the outside in. So that's why I'm always curious about that. Because I know you and your mom are awesome. You guys are doing your thing now, and that's what, drove you guys forward. And it was the same mentality I got from my mom. Just live life the best we can, do our best to be positive, to be happy, and just use the resources we have at the time. Like you said too, there's no right or wrong choice. Whatever someone does with any kind of information, whether it's a diagnosis, it's a breakup of some sorts, it's a failure of some sorts, they want to label it that way. We're always doing our best with the resources we have at the time. Going through something we went through, it's unfathomable. Like, the only time I ever heard brain tumor or something like that was in like a movie once in a while, maybe, or, something like that. So it's just, when those things happen, you can't put it to words, but it goes back to that vision. And speaking of that vision, your vision has, like, I've seen, at least from the outside perspective, just kind of seen it just grow and grow and grow. And so I kind of want to move into now, GRAE Inc. and Young Hollywood and all these things that you're doing that, in my mind, yeah, we've already talked about vision. Like, that's the fuel, but it comes back to contribution. And I see you doing so many things for other people, whether it's your advocacy in DC for brain tumor patients, or just on any kind of network you're on, or any kind of, media or something. But then now you're also creating your own, I'd argue to say, or actually I should rephrase that. Excuse me if this is ignorant of saying, your own agency of representing other people.
We're not representing people, but for me, I use the word community. I think I'm in an industry that is very clouded by other aspects, I'll say. There's a lot in the entertainment industry, and I think a lot of people have a really hard time being in the industry. It's very hard. You should get a lot of rejection, a lot of no's. There's a lot of different things happening. But taking the community that I've been able to be a part of in the brain tumor community, and realizing how important it was to my survival and how important it was to my fight. I realized that for me, that aspect of community is really important. Like you were saying, working with other people. For me, projects are a lot more fun and a lot more fulfilling when it involves people that you love and people that you want to work with and you're excited to talk to every day and who make you a better person. And so GRAE Inc., it's a company and it's very business focused, and we work with different brands to create campaigns for them, and we're also a shareholding company, so we invest in different brands. But again, it felt like there was an aspect of it missing. It felt like there was missing voices, just like it did when I was trying to write a book about myself. I was like, I don't know everything, so I can't be the only voice behind the projects that I do. And so that was how Young Hollywood was birthed. The first year, we've done one list now, because it started last year. It's a group of individuals that I think also hold that broadened perspective that I mentioned earlier. They're doing things in Hollywood, not just for themselves or for a certain outcome, but they're doing them to make the world a better place and to make things super interesting. And they're doing things that are very unique. So I was like, well, if I want to find people that I want to work with and have the same perspective as me, I got to do it myself. And so we started searching and we found this group of individuals who really are doing very incredible things. And that's how we created year one of the Young Hollywood list. I hope with COVID, we'll get to do another one. We don't know, kind of up in the air, but yeah, everywhere I go, I think it's about creating communities and surrounding yourself with people who have that interesting perspective, because you slip in and out of it. I think I was very lucky to be diagnosed at a time that was very pivotal for me in my life. I was in middle school and I started realizing that I was doing things because people around me were doing them, and I was acting certain ways because people around me were acting like that. And so having what I thought was my life like ripped away for a second, you are like stripped down to like just your soul and like who you are as a person, and then you have to kind of rebuild everything that you want your life to be. And so I try to do that with everything now that's working in entertainment. So yeah, just making sure I'm surrounding myself with people who make me better, and this group of people is them. So yeah.
I love it. That's amazing. And yeah, it's awesome to be able to help other people and create that community because, I'm a firm believer there's no such thing as self-made. It's a cool concept. It may fuel some egos, but at the end of the day, there's always someone on the other end of your success that got you there, that challenged you, that changed a belief, a perspective, or gave you the opportunity you're looking for. So to be able to allow people to have a higher probability of achieving their dreams and supporting them when they may feel they don't have the support, that's amazing. And that's one of the greater qualities that I appreciate about you and would make sense with, going back to the You're So Lucky and having me be a contributor of that book. And on that note of GRAE INC, I've noticed on your Instagram bio that you have Yale, is it EE? And I looked that up and it's executive education through Yale. And in your year-end 2020 video on your YouTube channel, you mentioned, at the end of 2020, I believe it was end of 2020, or just in 2020, you graduated high school and you got into some of your favorite schools. And let's talk about that because I'm curious, is that intention to fuel your efforts with GRAE INC and your other endeavors, or is that just something you're passionate about on the side?
It's been a lot of back and forth. I've had a very interesting relationship with school for a long
I
time.
could imagine.
Yeah, especially coming from a lawyer mother who is very all about school. I had to start going to online school in 7th grade when I got sick. It was just unrealistic. I'd be at school for like morning meeting, and then I'd be on my way home by like 9 a.m. So I just had to re, recreate how I learned, which was very hard because I loved learning. I was always like a book kid growing up. I was always had a book in my hand. And so to lose that aspect of school it was very hard for me because that's what we're taught growing up. Like you just have to be good at school and you have to get good grades and you have to get into a good college. And so all of that changed overnight. So I started going to online school. Through that experience, I met some of my best friends, including Gigi, who is another brain tumor survivor, who's also in the book. But then it came time to think about college, which is not something I ever had to think about, especially for someone who was told they had 6 months to live. You start living day by day instead of planning out for the future. Not that I believed I only had 6 months. I think I was way beyond that belief. Even when I was first told that, I was like, okay, so I'm in the 8%. Cool. Like, that's terrible for everyone who's not, but I'm in that 8%. And I just will be. But you still think day by day. So I had to take the SATs, which I was like, oh my gosh, why am I taking the SATs? Like, there are so many more important things in the world, which is, one of the challenges that comes along with this broadened perspective of everything is sometimes you have to do the little things that you really don't want to do. But I took the SAT and I started applying for colleges just to see if I could get in. That was something that I just wanted to see if I could do. It didn't mean that that was something I was going to do. But yeah, it was a very interesting thing. I'm going to share a little story that I think is one of my proudest moments in life. I applied to UCLA Film School because I knew I just wanted to go to school for something that I really loved. It was about the experience of doing it if I was going to. This acceptance rate is 4%, which is like worse than Harvard. So, but I had delusional optimism, but I did not get in. And that was mainly because my SATs were not that great, because I was granted accommodations because my headaches showed up, did not get them. They're like, she looks fine. So I got stuck in the normal kids room. But so my SATs weren't as great as they should have been for UCLA. But I did not get in. And there was a button at the bottom that was like, if you think this decision is wrong, click here to appeal. And then under that in red text was like, do not appeal. We will not accept appeals. This is only for people who like have to, like, for military purposes, or like something happened and like I was like, well, I'm gonna do it anyways. And so I had my college counselor help me with this letter, and everything they were writing was it was very like by the book. It was like, this is my score, and this is the grade I received in this class, and this is the grade I received in this class. And it was very like factual. It was like, these are the reasons I should be at your school because I meet the standards that you have listed on your website. But then at like 2 a.m. in, my crazy delusional state, I wrote a second letter, and it was very like driven just by the things I had seen. It talked about why I did things as an artist, the perspective I held in life, how I became the person I am today. And so I went back and forth on, should I submit the one that is what I think I should do, or should I submit the one that is like this true version of myself? And my mom and I, we submitted the factual one, which was not what I wanted to do. But as soon as I submitted it, they was like, you have until midnight to edit your letter. So we went on a walk, and on the walk, I was like, I just wish there was a way for them to see both sides of me, because I am two parts of a person. I am right and left brain. I'm factual and I'm by the book, but I'm also creative. And that's what makes me who I am. And my mom and I look at each other and we're like, that's it. I went home and I wrote a letter appealing to the left brain and appealing to the right brain. One was fully creative, who I was, and one was factual. I submitted that so every member on the board could read whatever one they wanted to read. They called me like a couple of days later, and they said, we would absolutely be honored to have you come to our school. And so that for me was just like a very amazing moment to realize that I didn't have to settle for what I thought I had to do. And I think that's kind of like a good metaphor for what I was going through growing up and being diagnosed. You can do things how society shows you to do them, but don't let that smush who you are as a person. I think there's ways to combine both. And that's how I try to live every day of my life. I did not end up going to UCLA, but I still know all the kids there, and I'm very, very grateful. But yeah, I ended up at the Yale School of Management's executive education, which allows me to continue pursuing my career as well as school at the same time. And it's a focus in digital marketing, which is kind of what I'm doing at GRAE. So this was a very long way to answer. Yes, I'm pursuing school that I think will help me in GRAE, but I'm also not allowing what society thinks I should be doing in college to control my life that I've built and what I really want to be doing. So I think, sometimes it's hard to find that balance, but I think my UCLA appeal letter was a good, example for me that I can do both. I can be creative and I don't have to sacrifice to, do what I think I have to. You can do everything. It's hard, and sometimes you have to wait to find the right answer, but it usually all comes together. It always has, so it will. Yeah, that was a very long story, but
No, that was perfect. I love it. And that's kind of how I think now. And it's funny because I think back to when I was about 24, 25. Up until that point, my dad always told me, yeah, go chase BMX. Just have a backup plan. And, after 2 different brain tumor diagnoses and recoveries, and then getting back to doing what I was doing on the world platform, he finally said, I think you got it. Things always seem to work out. And I built that belief as well. But through all the things you were just explaining, which that was an amazing story. I didn't know that. So thank you for sharing that. That's the point of this conversation. What stood out is 2 different things. One, it always comes back up to what's here. It's your vision. That pushed you forward. You saw an obstacle. You didn't see it as an obstacle, because we know if we're looking at a hallway and there's a chair in the hallway, we can say, oh, the chair is blocking me from going to the other end. Or we can go around the chair. We can move the chair. We can jump over the chair. That's a different perspective. You chose that. But going back to the beginning of that story, with the whole dilemma of the SATs and then people essentially judging you by your cover, I'm very passionate about this topic because it is one of the most profound cliches, don't judge a book by its cover. But in my case, that's what's almost killed me, was being judged by by cover from doctors. And then here you are going through a similar experience that's maybe preventing you from another aspect of your dream. And you had an outcome that wasn't desirable. You challenged that outcome because of your vision. You spoke from the left and right part of your brain, essentially your true self and your logical self. And then you denied their acceptance after, because you're like, I don't need this. You know, I just needed to prove to myself that it's possible. And that is such a profound thing that if any one thing is taken away from this, it's the ability to believe in ourselves and the power we have to not need something external. Because that was an external thing that you proved to yourself you didn't need.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I think yeah, I get very wild up when you're talking about yeah, it's exterior appearance. Yeah, it's been a struggle for me, I think, for a long time. It's what the book I wrote during quarantine is mainly about. It's about that even if we look perfectly healthy, everyone walking down the street has a story. Everyone's been through something. It may not be extremely dramatic, but everyone has a narrative in their head of how they've seen the world. And sometimes it's hard for people to understand that. I grew up having a hard time making friends because I was the kid that always needed to go home and take a nap. I couldn't be out in the middle of the night. I had to take care of my health. And so I've kind of created a friend group that's mainly kids with like extremely bad illnesses. Like my best friend has cystic fibrosis, my other best friend has gastroparesis, and I think we all really understand each other. But yeah, it's definitely a struggle every day to make the people around you see what you're going through. And it's not a battle that you can always win because people will not understand. Like we walk through our lives with people not understanding. But I think that underlying knowledge that there are people out there who do see us and there are people that understand is what gets me through the day. So that's speaking to that and the SAT experience. But yeah, I think you're right. I just had to prove to myself that I could do it. And then I let that go. It was a very hard decision, but
It's a badass decision.
thanks.
That's amazing. And then, you know, you made that choice and then you went down another route. And for all you know, if you had settled for the win that you fought for and accepted it, maybe it wouldn't have the same impact on your life now or in the future. And the route you chose is perfect because it's the route you chose. And the belief you have around it is what's going to be the determining factor of it being impactful for you, for GRAE INC, for other people that are involved with all the work you do. And speaking of stories, so one, I find it really fascinating what you just said about physical appearance, external things, external appearances, people judging by cover, because you're in an industry that is very much so about that.
Yeah.
And before I go into the question I have, that's kind of relevant, but not really. What goes through your mind with what I just said? You know, you're not. How should I word this? You don't believe in external covers as being a determining factor of how that person's defined. In your case, and in my case, that limited us. That almost killed me. It almost prevented you from an aspect of your dream. Mm-hmm. So many of us are judged by our physical appearance, whether it's the color of our skin, the clothes we wear, our health, you know, size, color of hair, clothing, whatever it is. But there's always a story going on beneath the surface. I know many successful millionaire and billionaires that you would never know because they wear skinny jeans and a black t-shirt. And they prefer that. So what I'm curious of is how all of this makes sense in your brain, being in the industry you are, and what is it about this industry that you're in that is, you know, fashion and modeling and acting and just putting on essentially a mask.
Yeah. I think for me, I had always had this passion for creativity, but what is really interesting about this industry is it allows for you to build a platform. And so for me, it was always about taking the talents I had been given to build a platform to then use that for something bigger than myself. And so I think along with that comes sometimes playing the game. But I try not to because like you said, everyone's going through something. I love the word sonder. It's the realization that each random passerby is living a life as vivid and complex as your own. That's the definition. So I think, yeah, I don't know. I think for me, playing characters is definitely a lot of fun, but my ultimate joy and goal is to play characters that I feel will help others. It's the goal with the book that I just wrote that I really would love to turn into a film. The characters are experiencing things that you would never know. And if I can share those characters and be those characters in the films that I am a part of and show people that there is so much more than your outward, aesthetic and how you look and how you dress, I hope that makes the world a better place, because it is so true. It doesn't have to be as extreme as a brain tumor, but everyone's going through something, whether they share it or not. And I try to live every single day remembering that. You don't always remember that. It's hard if you're getting like yelled at in traffic or something, but that person, that anger is coming from somewhere. They always say like hurt people hurt people. Again, cliche, but true. These emotions are coming from places. And so if we can just have that understanding that people are going through things, that is a big ask of the world. But I hope to use my acting as a way to show those stories and be a part of hopefully trying to make the world see things more clearly. Not everyone will see. That's impossible. We just like to live in our little bubbles. But I think mainly that realization came through how I was treated, growing up, just by the people around me and by people I considered my friends. It was hard for them to understand. And I don't think they meant anything bad by what they were doing, but I don't think people realize how hard it is for us, how we're treated and the things we hear and the things we go through, because we don't look sick. So yeah, it's an ongoing battle between remembering that other people don't understand and trying to make people, you can't make people act any one way. That's not your job to save the world or fix the world. I have to remember that every day. But yeah, hopefully use my skills to make the world a better place. And that happens to be through acting.
I love it. Very intentional, very creative. And what you're just speaking about, a quote that was shared with me, or a concept, was, what's theirs is theirs, what's mine is mine. We're all doing the best we can with the resources we have at the time. We're all perfect in our own way. We're just doing the best we can. Someone hurting someone else with their words, their energy, their actions, whatever, is inward hurt. You said hurt people hurt people. I'm a big believer that. I don't think at anyone's core as being a human being, they want to hurt someone else. They're just doing the best they can to relieve the pain they have. And that reminds me of, what you were just speaking of, reminds me of the word empathy. I believe it's a superpower, like to be able to empathize with other people, to try to understand. We're not going to understand everyone's journey. We can comprehend what they're saying, but no one has the same exact experience. Maybe being brain tumor patients, maybe being mothers, maybe being actors, we can understand where we're coming from, but everyone has their own unique journey. And one of my favorite books is by Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of the chapters he titles, First Seek to Understand, Then Be Understood. And I think that's an issue we have today, especially with this last year. And even this year already, like a lot of crazy things have happened, especially in the United States. We have so many people trying to be understood rather than trying to understand the other party, whether that's a human being or a political party. I didn't mean it politically, but it could be taken either way. When we can try to understand where the other person's coming from, then we'll find common ground. And then it'll allow our voice to be heard. But when we try to, overpower other people, we're going to go into defense mode, and it's just going to be a battle. And then bringing it back to our story, being judged by our cover, I'm curious. Like you said, we look like, perfectly healthy people from the outside. You would never know unless you knew our story or talked to us. We don't show any symptoms. We're pushing forward. We're not defined by the fact that we live with brain tumors. I'm curious, because I get this question all the time. Do you think about the fact that you live with a brain tumor on any regular basis, whether it's daily, weekly, or monthly, or is it just sporadic when it comes up?
Oh, that's a good question. That's really interesting, because in my daily life, like IRL Grace, I'm gonna say no. I mean, for me, it's treating my body right and managing my symptoms and doing my health routine has kind of become like just that. It's a routine now. I definitely agree when you say that we're not defined by our illness. For me, that's something that I realized very soon on. It is something that has happened to me, so it's changed my perspective because I've walked through it. I've seen everything, but it's not who I am. And I think sometimes that's hard as well, because once people do know your story, you can't really take that away. And I don't want to be just like the brain tumor person. But yeah, I think in my daily life, you're right. I don't think about it as much as I think about other brain tumor survivors, because I've become aware to how prevalent it really is. So a lot of my life does revolve around my friends who are currently in treatment, but I don't really think of myself very often. That's kind of an interesting perspective. So
Yeah, I get that question all the time, and I'm like, I mean, other than when people ask me or talk to me about it, or I, happen to be writing about it, I don't think about it. It's not like it's
yeah,
something that defines who I am. I don't think it's a part of me, and I think you and I have spoken about this before with language. I don't refer to it as my anymore. That was one of the first things another brain tumor survivor shared with me in the past when I was first going through my recovery. It was like, no, why are you saying my? Do you want it to be
yeah,
a part of you? It's like, no. Like, is it a part of you? I was like, no. Let's say
no,
the. It deletes the power. And
yeah,
that's something I've been able to share with other people that allow them to feel empowered. I think that's the thing that comes back to the common theme of us, why we went through the experience to begin with. Whether you say it's fate, it's God, it's universal energy, it's whatever you believe created that outcome for us to go through, we were able to handle it. And I think it's because we were instilled with the beauty of empowerment. We were able to focus on a vision that allowed us to move forward, and so much so that we've been able to share that with other people in all the things we do. You're very intentional with your acting, your modeling, your writing, like whatever it is you're doing that's creative to you. And that's the same for me. I'm always thinking about how I can impact others. And I think that's something that I see in a lot of people that go through some sort of tragedy, whether it's an illness, it's a divorce, it's a freak accident, something that happened that challenged their belief of the world, the paradigm essentially of which they operated from shifted. And then it becomes about everyone else. Yeah,
yeah.
we want things for ourselves, but why? Why we want resources so we can help other people do more things. And it's just really fascinating. So I love that you shared that. And I love all the things you do. I love the fact that you reached out to me and many other people to contribute to a book. And on that note of books, I want to wrap up with asking, just if you can, I know it's not out yet. Maybe it's been promoted yet. I don't know. I haven't seen anything about it. But anything you can share about your recent book that you wrote. The only reason I know about it is from your year-end review of 2020 where you mentioned it. I was like, oh shit, I didn't even know she was writing another book. Cool.
Yeah.
Um, is there anything you can speak to about, just maybe a 30-foot view of what, you kind of alluded to it earlier, but just kind of like what your intention is with the book, what it may be about,
Yeah.
and when it
So
may be out?
yeah, I'll be as like secretive as I can because this one I have bigger intentions for. I think our first book was very focused on telling our stories and it was about brain tumors. But I hope that this one reaches like a broader audience and starts working on that goal of shifting perspectives. So this book is a fiction book. It's like characters and story and everything, but it's definitely a little bit based on my life. So it follows a girl who has a brain tumor on this journey to becoming a part of the unseen. I think a lot of us, like we've been talking about the whole time, we don't look like brain tumor survivors walking down the street.
Mm-hmm.
So it walks through struggles of losing friends and not connecting with your peers anymore, and finding those people that do truly understand, which is kids with invisible illnesses of all different types. So it walks through what my friends have been through, like cystic fibrosis and gastroparesis, and cancer patients who have developed drug addictions due to treatment, which was a perspective I had never even thought of until I heard someone else's story on it. So it really just follows what it means to be fighting an illness in secret and how we can create communities and how being able to see the unseen all around us is the way to see the world in full color is kind of our little phrase. So yes, I don't know when it will be out. This one's being more handled by my management team, which is exciting and terrifying for me at the same time. But yeah, I hope to turn it into a film. I think that's how it has the potential to reach the biggest audience. And I hope that it shows people of all different illnesses, specifically brain tumors shines a light on that. But people have been through all different things that people do understand, whether people show it in your daily life or not. Because I've struggled a lot over the years, just feeling unseen by the people around me. They don't see, I look very healthy and I put on that front, I think a lot as well, speaking in Congress and, speaking on all these platforms. But then you go home and you have seizures and you have headaches and you still have those struggles, whether you show them to the world or not. So yeah, these characters go through a lot of things that you don't get to see on a daily basis, but this book kind of lays it all out there. So I hope it'll be out soon, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's exciting. I'm looking forward to reading it, and I'm so excited and just thankful to have this conversation. And I'm just, yeah, congrats on writing yet another book, and this one being a fictional book. So
Yeah.
that's interesting, and I'm sure it will turn into a film someday. Just knowing you and all the things you're doing, and yeah, congrats on that. That'll be exciting to read, and I know it'll change a lot of perspectives and therefore change a lot of lives in the process. Okay, I want to end on this because I just came across this today. I was making sure I did my due diligence to make sure I had, a good amount of content to discuss with you because you're, again, a very fascinating person, and I'm just really interested in your mind. Hence, the Gray Matters podcast. It's a play on words between the gray area of life, the unseen, as you worded it, but also brain matter and how our brains work. And so, when I was doing some research on the line on YouTube, I came across a poem that you read out loud, and you titled it "After the Tone, Please Don't Leave a Message." And I listened to it, and it was very fascinating. And I want to end with this, and I just want your perspective on the poem itself and why you titled it "After the Tone, Please Don't Leave a Message."
Yeah, so that poem was a part of a contest that my mom found. She does a lot with, finding community as well, which I'm extremely grateful for. But she was searching the internet as well, and she found that there's this place called Gilda's Club, and it's a clubhouse for people with cancer. And there happened to be one in my hometown, and they were holding this contest where they asked teenagers to write a letter to cancer. And so I was like, how can I kind of, again, balance my left brain and my right brain? I was supposed to write an essay. I ended up submitting a free verse poem because it's what inspired me that day, even though it was definitely against the rules, but I ended up winning. So it
Oh,
worked.
congrats.
Thanks.
Breaking the rules has its pluses
It
sometimes.
does sometimes. Yes. As long as you're not breaking laws. But yeah, I think for me, the poem, it's not really my experiences. It's kind of, I think, a lot of different people's experiences and stories that I've heard over the years. And it kind of ends with this whole little scenario where it talks about, this friendship bracelet being locked around this patient's wrist and becoming best friends and not knowing why cancer decided to come into their life. And so I think the whole thing, it was performed to a room full of 1,000 people who were affected by cancer. So I wanted to make sure that it contained a message that I think they could all find a bit of themselves in. I don't remember how I came up with the title, but I think I was playing on the whole, talking directly to cancer, and the whole thing is basically a voicemail to cancer. The performance starts with the ringing of the phone, and I'm leaving this message. But just realizing that we don't really want a message back. We've made our minds up on our own narrative, and we've made the decision to live our life in the way we want. Cancer is something that happened, but it does not control us, and it does not define who we are. I think you have to make the decision at some point in your journey to take control. And it's a hard one to make because it is such a scary word. And we grow up in a society that shows a certain vision of cancer in media. And we're taught that it's the scary thing that ruins families and kills everybody it touches. And that's just not true. And so I think I wrote this poem during a time in my life where I was really deciding that I was in control of my own narrative. And I got to make these decisions for myself. It wasn't some outside source that had control over me. It was me. And so I think that's kind of where it came up with creating your own narrative and being like so delusional that you just believe it. You just have to. No one can tell me that I'm not going to do what I want to do. No one's going to tell me that I am going to die. No one's going to tell me that I just am a sick person and I can't make change in the world. I just have to decide to do these things, and I will.
I love it. I love it. And yeah, on that note, that's just a good way to end, is just, focusing on the vision that you're working towards. And in your case, literally writing your own script, and figuratively for those listening, you have a choice. You can choose to believe the noise, which I believe is a lot of other people's past experiences coming out and projecting onto us, whether it's, fact for them or not. It's not our fact. It's not our truth. You have the choice to write your own script, so to speak, for your life. You have the choice to be in the driver's seat of your life everything that happens to you outside of your own will is what it is. We have no control. We have no control over the things we want either. We have a higher probability of creating the life we want when we believe in ourselves and we start with delusional optimism of the vision that we're creating. Because same with me. People told me, you're not gonna be able to make a living riding your bike. You're not gonna be able to do this. You're gonna drop out of high school, do that. No. But like you, I wasn't willing to listen to people. Thankfully, I had my parents supporting me. Similar to you, you had your mom backing you, still backing us. We have our parents in our corner, and it's just such an amazing testimonial to what belief can do. Because we've talked to so many people, didn't have the outcomes that we had, and I've talked to a lot of different surgeons and doctors, and like some people that should be thriving today, they thought they were going to go the opposite way, and that's what happened. Some people that had no chance, somehow they're alive. Comes down to belief, because that's the fuel to everything. And so I appreciate you sharing your journey today and your story and your wisdom and like all the things you're doing to contribute, all the amazing things that you've created in your life. You and your mom are a special group of people, and I'm thankful that we connected, and I'm thankful for your time today. And I'm just curious, do you have any final words you want to leave the podcast with?
I think when you were just saying that, it reminded me of something that I put in my TED talk that I still believe to this day. You were saying, like, we don't always have control over the things that happen to us, but the control to make decisions, that's up to us. And I show this diagram in my TED talk. It's a circle, and on each side of the circle there's an arrow that goes both ways. Events can force us to make a decision, which is what happened to me, and decisions can cause a strand of events. So if we're making these decisions that just are positive and are the best option that we have at the time, playing the cards we're dealt, the events, I think, just tend to get more and more positive as we go. I didn't have control. This happened to me, but the decision to make it a positive experience and not let it ruin my life, because like Kelsey, who was also in our book, we did a call the other day, and she was saying, I was told multiple times, this is going to ruin your life. This is going to ruin your life. Like it's ruined. And then she went out and she's like, no, I want a family. And she has a kid now. And like all these things that she was told just were not true because she decided they weren't. So the decisions that you make, they're up to you. We don't have control of the things that happen to us, but just making the best decisions you can in the most positive way you can. That's the key to getting where you want to go and surviving.